Today I'm speaking with Danny Brassell, America's leading reading ambassador. Welcome, Danny.
Thanks so much for having me, Jen. Thanks for all that you do to promote joy in the world.
Yeah, thank you. And so we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, reading. I think I'm close to 200 books this year.
Wow.
Last year, sorry. We're in a new year. So yeah, I'm an avid reader. Tell us about Danny, and then we'll get into our favorite subject.
Well, it's funny, Jen, that I'm nicknamed America's leading reading ambassador because I grew up hating reading. The only thing I used to read was a TV guide. My father was a librarian, and I always hated the public library. It always smelled funny to me. The furniture was always uncomfortable. There was always some elderly woman telling me to be quiet. There's always a homeless guy who thinks he's a vampire hanging out in the library. I always hated it. And it wasn't until I started teaching in the inner city in South Central Los Angeles, and I saw that a lot of my students didn't grow up with the advantages that I grew up with, and I said, shame on me. I mean, I was very blessed, Jen. I had both of my parents in my home. We were lower middle class, but we always had food on the table. My parents always read to us and in front of us, and we always had access to wonderful reading materials. And so it really became my passion and my mission to spread a joy of learning for all my students and getting them excited about reading. And now I work with people all over the world talking about the importance of reading and making reading fun.
Good. Thank you. And thank you for that. Now, as a mother of three sons, I understand the difficulty in getting a guy to read.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when they got into trouble, the two youngest ones are really close in age, and, they rumble sometimes. And when I want quiet, I'll give them, read a book, because they say, Mom, I'm bored. And I'll say, read a book. And they look at me like, I'm from La La Land. Why is it so difficult to get boys to read?
It's a great question, Jen. It's really what inspires my work. Schools do an adequate job of teaching kids how to read, but the question I always ask teachers and parents is, what good is it teaching kids how to read if they never want to read? I teach kids why to read because I've never had to tell a kid, go watch TV. I've never had to tell a kid, go play a video game. And I never want to have to tell a kid, go read a book. I want them to choose to do it on their own. And what I find is the failing in most schools, especially with boys like your son, is we're forcing them to read things that they have no interest in reading. The research is very clear on this, Jen. It really doesn't matter what you read. What matters is how much you read. It doesn't matter if you're reading James Joyce or James and the Giant Peach. People who read more read better. I can always tell people that the little boy who only reads Captain Underpants is going to be a better reader than a little boy who refuses to read anything. Captain Underpants is the gateway drug to Shakespeare. But first of all, we got to get the kids excited about it. And that's really one of the things, you're not alone. 4 out of 5 of struggling and reluctant readers are boys. And it's because boys and girls are very different. Little girls will read books about little boys. Little boys have no interest in reading books about little girls. There's a great scene in one of the Diary of the Wimpy Kid books by Jeff Kinney, where the mother decides to have a mother-son book club, and she invites all the boys from the neighborhood to bring books to her house, and they'll all read together. And the books that she has brought are like Sarah Plain and Tall, Little House on the Prairie, Anne of Green Gables. And the books that the boys bring are like How to Cheat at Video Games, Book of Bodily Functions, All About Dinosaurs, things like that. And so, especially if you have 3 boys, those are the types of things. And I guarantee you, because you're a parent, I'm a parent, we can have 3 kids and all of them are completely different. So yes. I always let the child's interest guide what kinds of books I'm going to get them excited about.
Oh, wow. I just had an aha moment. So the key is, excuse me, the key is to let them read what they want to read and don't have this preconceived notion of what they should be reading.
Yeah, for some reason, people think that reading has to be Dostoevsky, War and Peace, and they say that, people aren't reading that much in the 21st century. I completely contradict that notion. People read so much more now than they did in the 19th century. I was with a 4th grade boy, and his teacher told me he doesn't like to read. He won't read anything. And in 1 hour, Jen, that kid must have texted about 20 of his friends. He sent several emails. He surfed the internet. He's highly literate. Now, he's not reading a novel, but he is reading extensively. We have to broaden our definition of literacy and what literacy is.
Yes, thank you. That makes absolute sense. Oh, boy. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. So I know you talked about your background in schools and what got you interested in reading? Because even though your father was a librarian or worked, for the library, you didn't seem to have any interest. So what got you interested?
That's actually a good question, Jen. Nobody ever really asked me that question. In college, one semester I studied abroad in Spain, and it was a great experience for me, Jen, because for the first time in my life, I was discriminated against without realizing it. I was born with all kinds of advantages I never realized. I was born white, male, and American. Life was pretty easy for me, and I didn't realize how until I went to Spain, and people treated me very differently because I didn't speak Spanish. Everybody treated me like I was stupid. Well, I'm not that stupid, but I didn't speak Spanish very well. And when you're learning a second language, you get headaches all the time, you have nightmares. It's very trying on your brain. And so one of my classmates, she handed me John Grisham's The Pelican Brief. And I was so starving to read anything in English. I read that book in like a day. And then I got excited and I got A Time to Kill. And then I remember spending $30 for a used paperback, beaten up copy of The Firm. And then from John Grisham, he's the one that whet my appetite. From John Grisham, I advanced to Mary Higgins Clark and Sidney Sheldon. And then I just started reading anything and everything. But I found that passion for reading. I mean, I've worked with so many boys like your sons. I'll give you an example. When I was teaching second grade, I had a little boy named Kiara. And Kiara's first grade teacher told me, Kiara don't know nothing. I'm like, well, thank you. Well, Kiara, who didn't know nothing, comes into my classroom one day and he's like, hey, Mr. Brassell, you see Barkley last night? He had 18 points and 16 boards. Thank you, Kiara. Because from that day forward, after lunch every day, I'd sit with Kiara on my lap, and together we would read the LA Times sports section together. And would you know it, Jen, by the end of the year, Kiara was one of the best readers in my classroom, and all that kid ever read about were sports because that's what he was interested in. Again, I'm not saying that literature is not important, but I'm saying you got to whet their appetite before you get to that. You can't start with the medicine. You got to give them some applesauce or some ice cream to get them to let the medicine go down.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. From experience and just talking to you, I'm realizing that we need to get rid of, we as mothers, because usually it's us who try to push them to read, to go to college, to all these things. We have to get rid of this preconceived notion that unless they're reading Shakespeare, they're not reading. And then, try to allow them to explore their interest, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I was doing an interview last week with Nigerian television, and Nigeria was colonized by the British, and it finally gained its independence in the 1960s, but it still has a British system of education. And so the kids are being forced to read Jane Austen and Charles Dickens and William Shakespeare. And again, I'm not putting down any of those authors, but if you want to get Nigerian kids excited about reading, maybe you should introduce them to Chinua Achebe and some of the other wonderful Nigerian authors out there where they're like, oh, there's somebody like me. And again, I'm not saying you have to only read people like you, but that's a great entry point to get you excited about it.
Yeah, because the point is reading. It's not what to read, is to get to the reading first.
That's right.
And then, okay, great. And this isn't the same thing, but my kids loved video games.
Right.
And I was scared to death of them playing video games until the Iraqi war. And then they were playing Red Alert, and they were able to tell me different things with the game. And I'm thinking, did you listen to that on the news? And they said, no, it's in Red Alert. Yeah. And they were actually keeping up with the Iraqi war through their games. And, like I said, it has nothing to do with reading, but
because I was actually just working with a boy, and his mother was frustrated because all he likes are video games. And I said, well, let's get him reading books about video games. I'm like, here's a book that's going to show him how to get to the next level in the game that he's trying to play. And that, do you know that kid who would never read anything? The moment I gave him a chapter on how to beat the video game, like in 20 minutes, no problem, because he was interested in it. I mean,
absolutely.
I love reading books about leadership. I love reading biographies. But if you give me a romance novel, it'll probably take me 10 times as long to read that because I'm not as interested in that. Whereas maybe you, Jen, love romance novels and you speed right through it. All of us are a little bit different, and that's what I always say is the interest should guide the reader.
Yes, that's true. And no, I never did like romance novels.
Well, great.
I actually hated romance novels until I found out about Navy SEALs in romance novels. You see where my mind went there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So tell me why you think people don't like to read in general.
Yeah, again, Jen, I think that schools really teach you how to hate reading. I think they're force feeding. I mean, I remember when I was in high school, I was forced to read The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. And again, no offense to people that love The Scarlet Letter. The book is about Hester Prynne, who's committed adultery, and so she has to wear a large A on her chest. And I asked my teacher if I could wear a large B on my chest because I was so bored reading that book. And again, what are we trying to accomplish? If we're trying to accomplish critical reading skills, well, I know plenty of people, they might not be able to keep up with the classical novel, but they're very up to date when they read the New York Times every day, or they're scanning the internet looking for information. You know, because that's one of the important things about us as teachers. I always tell people there's no such thing as fake news. There's only people who depend on one news source. You shouldn't let other people think for you.
Yes.
God gave you this wonderful thing between your ears. You should learn how to use it. I mean, I had started my teaching career teaching high school social studies and history. And the first thing I always teach people when I teach history is that history books are usually written by the winners. Every event in history has multiple points of view, and it's really important to me that we consider different points of view. You don't have to agree with different points of view, but it's important that we learn how to listen and be respectful of one another. The other thing I always wanted to teach my students, I said, hey, I'm not going to teach you what to think. I'm going to teach you how to think. You should be questioning anything that's being said to you all the time. And I think we'd all be much better off if people wouldn't just be this nodding cult and listen to specific figures all the time. I think you should be challenging people and trying to get diverse points of view. That's one of the reasons I love meeting new people like you, Jen. I mean, you and I don't have to agree on everything, but it's really important that we listen to one another. I try to teach kids to be able to disagree without being disagreeable towards one another. You don't have to be rude to disagree with another person.
That's true. That's true. One of the things we used to do in high school, I went to junior high in Jamaica, and one of the big things we used to debate a lot. And, you know, it taught us how to disagree with our, you know, opposing forces without, you know, being nasty or horrible to them. So, yeah, for sure.
I remember I had a nun in second grade, and I was yelling at a classmate, and she said, "The louder your voice gets usually means you're losing your argument, Daniel." And I'll never forget that because she's right. You know, if you have a solid argument, there's no problem with just being able to mindfully debate one another.
Yeah, that's true. Wow, I really appreciate this, you know, this conversation because it's so important, and we tend to be losing interest in reading because there's so much crap to read. You know, I'm sorry, it's just true, right? Yeah. But I've learned about a lot of successful people, and that's one of their biggest things is that they read a lot. How does reading and success in life correlate?
Well, that's a great question again, Jen. I should be paying you for these questions. You know, I've done a lot of research on this in various fields, from business to government to even sports. And there's plenty of readers that don't become leaders, but I have never read about a successful and effective leader that's not also an avid reader. I mean, from Elon Musk to LeBron James to Pitbull, these are successful people. And one of the primary reasons they're successful is they're very curious and they constantly want to improve. And so one of the ways they do that is by reading. I could have kissed LeBron James when he was playing for the Miami Heat before the NBA Finals. They showed him in the locker room reading The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins. And I could have kissed him because I'm like, that photograph just did more to get little boys excited about reading than anything I can ever. And so this is what I'm always preaching to people is, hey, if you want to get better at anything, I'll give you an example. I was watching a wonderful speech by Tony Dungy, who was the football coach for the Indianapolis Colts. They won the Super Bowl. And he gave a wonderful speech where he was talking to all of these young men that wanted to be professional football players. And he said, well, how do you become a professional football player? Well, 99% of professional football players came from colleges. Well, how do you get into college? Well, you have to have good grades. And how do you get good grades? By reading. And then he said, so that was a great point. But then he said, when you get to the NFL, he said that the skill set athletically, most of the guys are very similar in terms of being strong. But he said what separates pros from the people that don't make it in the pros is their mental ability. He said, we don't spend a lot of time in practice hitting one another. We spend a lot of time studying. And the better readers, the smarter players are the ones that last in the NFL. And again, I could have kissed the man. I'm like, this is a great message showing kids the importance of reading there. But again, you can look at any types of leaders. I was sharing with an audience the other day about presidents. I love studying different presidents. And President Teddy Roosevelt, they say even when he was president of the United States, he would read 3 books a day, almost as many as you, Jen. 3 books a day while he was president. The story I was sharing with the audience the other day was there was a press conference in the early 1960s with President Kennedy, and a reporter asked him if he read anything for fun. And President Kennedy said, I'm reading this really delightful spy series by this guy named Ian Fleming. It's about this agent 007, James Bond. Well, because of that statement, all of a sudden those books started selling like crazy, and Hollywood bought the rights, and that's why they created the James Bond movie series.
Wow.
Because of a flippant comment by President Kennedy. I always loved it. President Ford said that when he was president, he always started his day by reading the sports page. And a reporter couldn't believe it. He's like, you're the leader of the free world. How do you read the sports page before the front page? And he said, well, the front page just shows man's failures. The sports page celebrates his triumphs. And I thought, wow, that's a really great perspective. I think all of us need to, and I shouldn't have said this earlier. I said it doesn't matter what you read, because one of the things I do point out to kids when I'm talking to them is that you are what you read. So read good stuff. Things that fill up your soul. One of the best decisions I made in 2021 was I decided to stop watching the news because there was no point. Every time I watched the news, I just got frustrated. It made me feel sad and angry. I'm like, why am I doing that? So that's why I'm doing so many more podcasts and things. I'm like, I want to listen to things like what you're doing, Jen, things that promote joy and make you a better person. And that's what I tell kids. I'm like, if you want to get better, read things that are going to lift you up, not tear you down.
Yeah, for sure. We can always find bad things to read. But so what is Danny grateful for today?
I am grateful to be spending this time with you, Jen.
Thank you.
I love that question. I think all of us should spend a little bit of each day in gratitude. Just when you think you've got it really bad. I was actually saying this to a business leader the other day because he was griping to me about making his quotas. And I said, well, if you feel that bad, why don't you spend some time in the cancer ward at the Children's Hospital? You'll gain a little bit of perspective. Yeah. Pretty grateful. When I used to teach English as a second language to engineering students at the University of Southern California. And it was fascinating, Jen, because I always asked my students, what's the thing in America that impresses you the most? And they always said the same thing, and it always shocked me. They said, the fact that you can criticize your political leaders without going to prison. Holy cow. Yeah. That was amazing. It gave me a lot of perspective. It gave me a lot.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. And how can we get in touch with you? And can you tell us, what you have to offer?
Great. Well, I wanted to serve you and your audience. So if everybody goes to freegiftfromdanny.com, again, that's freegiftfromdanny.com, and I'm sure you'll put it in the show notes.
Sure.
I'm going to give everybody a complimentary electronic copy of my book, Read, Lead, and Succeed. This is a book I wrote for a school principal who was trying to keep his faculty positively engaged. So I said, okay, I'll write you. So every week I give you a concept, an inspirational quote, an inspirational story, a book recommendation on a book you should read, but you're probably too lazy. So I also give you a children's picture book that demonstrates the same concept. You can read that in 5 minutes. Because I want all of us feeding our souls by reading positive things every single day. I'm also going to include a free access to a parent training I do, which gives you it whets your appetite for my reading program. I've got the world's top reading engagement program, where in just a couple of months, I can get the kids to read more, read better, and love reading. I mean, it's great because in just 2 months, most kids improve their reading by 2 to 3 grade levels. That's all fine and good. But what is near and dear to my heart. What's important to me is that kids that hated reading now love it. And it doesn't matter what school does to them to traumatize them. They're going to want to read on their own for the rest of their lives. So you'll have access to all those things. I'm excited about that. I'm very excited. I'm working with my partner, Dermot Hudner is the founder of a wonderful program in Ireland called Cybersmarties, which is a social media platform for kids that teaches kids positive interaction habits. And so if a kid types in "you're ugly," it won't actually send the message. It asks for better ways of doing it. And we find that within 2 weeks, it's eliminated cyberbullying for most kids. It's actually working with over 200,000 children in two countries right now. We're expanding throughout the Middle East, Africa, India, and Pakistan. So those are the things I'm very excited about. I was really excited to get to spend some time with you today. I was looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Me too. And thank you for sharing all you have to offer and talking to me about my favorite subject, reading. So anything else?
Not at all. Here, I'll give your audience one quick tip as parents. This is probably the most popular tip I give to people. I believe in embracing technology, not fearing technology. And I have a feeling that television is here to stay. Well, President Bush Sr. 30 years ago signed a very important law in the United States that every television set sold in this country has to have closed captioning. So here's a quick tip for all the parents out there. Turn on the closed captioning on the TV. And parents always say, well, wait a sec, if the show's in English and the subtitles are in English, what good does that do? Well, that's a good point, but let me make another point. Have you ever watched a show with subtitles and not looked at the subtitles? That's very difficult to do. Your brain is directed towards that text. And there's actually research that supports this. If you look at reading scores around the world, the more kids watch TV, the lower their reading scores drop, except for one country. The country where kids watch the most TV also has the highest reading scores in the world. It's Finland. And people always ask, well, how can that be? I'm like, well, because Finland makes really bad TV shows. And so what they do is they import all these old American sitcoms like Welcome Back, Kotter and the Brady Bunch, and they have to subtitle them for the kids. The kids are reading all the time. So a quick win for all parents listening right now is turn on that closed captioning on the TV.
That makes absolute sense. Thank you very much, Dr. Danny Brassell, for sharing that, profound tip with us today. I like it. I'll even use it for myself if I had a TV. Thank you.
Thanks for all that you do, Jen. God bless.
Sure, thanks.